Hey y'all, I'm Kelly Moody and you're listening to the Ground Shots podcast, an audio project exploring our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling with farmers, herbalists, craftspeople, naturalists, artists, and more. Hey y'all, it's Kelly Moody and you're listening to the Ground Shots podcast. I've been camping the past couple weeks by the Gila River in southern New Mexico, and it's been really sweet to spend time in a place and watch the season move here, and watch the rains affect the river itself. I can see it outside my window right now as I say this, and there's a storm coming, yet there's still sunshine. I love those beautiful days. I've been really appreciating having some isolation and quiet in this time right now. And it seems like the rest of the world, as I record this, is also experiencing some isolation because of the coronavirus. So I've been out here for a few days without any cell service or internet. So as I record this, I really don't know what's actually happening out there in regards to that, but it's definitely been on my mind. I'm trying out a new microphone for this intro. My friend Calibri, who I interviewed for the podcast last week, who has a bunch of really cool audio equipment because he is starting his own podcast, and he had an extra microphone that he let me borrow and try out. And he also gave me some lavalier mics, so when I interview people now, I can clip a mic onto their shirt and get sound that's more focused and a little less background noise. I know some episodes it's really sweet to hear the birds, and other episodes you can hear flies buzzing and traffic and things like that. So I think the lavalier mics will be really nice to have. So this episode of the Ground Shots podcast features a conversation with Hannah Schiller of Foliage Botanics. And I haven't done a lot of interviews for the podcast via Skype or Google Chats or Zoom, but this one I did do that because I had access to internet, and Hannah and I have been talking about doing an interview for the podcast since like a year ago, maybe longer, and we were hoping we would be able to get together in person, but we haven't been able to because I've been on the West Coast and Hannah lives in the Hudson Valley of New York. And so even though it's really sweet to be able to do a ton of in-person interviews for this podcast, it's just not always practical because, for me too, the ability for me to be physically with people is not always practical. I know some folks do solely online interviews, but in this case, just wanted to let you know that because a lot of my podcast episodes are very full of soundscapes, and you can tell it's an in-person interview. So in this one, you'll be able to tell that it's different from that. So Hannah Smith Schiller is an herbalist, botanist, and all-around plant enthusiast who runs Foliage Botanics, a small herbal business in the Hudson Valley of New York. And her work is a confluence of all the passions and pieces in her background: agriculture, art, clinical herbalism, land stewardship, and social justice. Hannah offers herbal products, health consultations, a seasonal apothecary land share, and teaches classes. Each month, Hannah leads a by-donation plant walk at varying locations around the valley where she lives, and it's focused on botany, plant identification, and ecological appreciation. At the heart of Hannah's work is this element of education, hoping to empower others to take back their health and their food and engage more deeply with the plant world, and to provide a variety of opportunities for people to bring plant medicine and wild foods into their lives. Hannah is a cheerleader for bioregionalism, making our communities more localized and self-reliant, breaking down capitalist approaches to ancient knowledge, and shifting our cultural mentality from endless growth to minimalist, place-based, seasonal living. I met Hannah back in 2012 when we both were spring interns for the United Plant Savers at the Goldenseal Sanctuary, which is in Southeast Ohio. And that was an amazing spring that changed both of our lives. Since then, we have crossed paths all over the country and even lived together for a summer couple years later at Dancing Springs Farm in Asheville, North Carolina. So it's been really sweet to know Hannah and be friends with Hannah over the years and see her plant journey, and she's seen mine. So it's an honor to interview Hannah and get to catch up with her and have y'all witness it. In this episode with Hannah, we talk about Hannah's letter writing project, which is called The Bones We Keep, and the importance of letter writing. And Hannah and I have been writing letters to each other ever since we met, so we talk about that a little bit too. Hannah's quarterly seasonal bioregional herb packages and what inspires her to do these. We talk about bioregional herbalism and how it gives us a perspective on the limits of a place. We speak about Hannah's journey studying plants and herbal medicine over the years. We speak about Hannah's experience working the first aid station with the Herbalist 7 song at the rainbow gatherings that happen every year, and how this experience was pretty invaluable to Hannah. And we talk about a few plants, including black birch. So if you enjoy this podcast, consider supporting the project monthly on Patreon. I pay a sound engineer a living wage. I often drive to meet guests and do in-person interviews, which costs me gas money. And I pay monthly subscription fees to podcast hosts to make this all happen. And it would not be possible without support on Patreon or through PayPal donations. So if you look forward to Ground Shots podcast episodes and appreciate the content that we feature on the podcast, consider supporting us through one of those ways. And if you can't support us in that way, you can also give us a review on iTunes or share our episodes on social media platforms, and share it with a friend too, in person, and listen together. All of it is helpful. So with that, let's go ahead and get to this conversation with Hannah Schiller. I was really excited to get to chat with her. I hope you enjoy it. Burn with the light that reveals our faces. Burn with the heat that will warm these places. I know you pretty well, but folks who listen to the podcast maybe do or don't know you, so maybe you could introduce yourself and where you live, where you've been living, and tell us a little bit about your project, Foliage Botanics.
Okay, so my name's Hannah Schiller, Hannah Smith Schiller. Smith is my mom's last name. Gotta honor the matriarch there. And I live in the Hudson Valley of New York. It's about 2.5 hours north of New York City, in a town called Pine Plains, which is live on basically 500 acres that I don't own, but it's a sheep farm, and it's along the Chicago Creek on Mohican land, traditional Mohican land. And yeah, so I live here and I run this herbal business called Foliage Botanics, but it's also really more of like an ecological project, plant exploration business that is a number of different things. It's at the heart of it is really education, or that's what I want to be the heart of it. I want to, as a trained herbalist, I make herbal products and sell those. I have a seasonal apothecary land share that are these boxes, much like a CSA, but like a community-supported herbalism project, that these boxes arrive to people. Some people are local, some people are at a distance. They arrive to them seasonally, and they contain seasonally specific remedies in the way that they provide medicine that fits the seasons of the body, but they are also made in real time from plants specific to that season that are growing, that I'm making medicine from right then and there. So a lot of my philosophy has shifted to being like very bioregional and plant place-based, so focused on this area, this region where I live, and making as much medicine from what grows around me or what I can grow here or what other people grow here. So there's that. And then I also do herbal consultations as an herbalist. I trained with various clinical herbalists in various clinical settings. So I offer that. And I see that less as this sort of like top down, I'm an herbalist, I'm gonna like, tell you how to heal yourself, but more this kind of like empowering conversation about how someone else can start using herbal medicine in their life. And then what else? Oh, and then I teach classes and lead plant walks. That's definitely the part that I love the most. Leading plant walks, especially.
What inspired you to first start Foliage Botanics?
To start Foliage Botanics? Well, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of herbal businesses out there. There are a lot of herbal products and lots of different teachers. I guess I felt like, that I just wanted to do it. I wanted to do this work, and so I felt called to it, and I want to do it. I don't do it full time, but I wanted to make stuff and talk about plants with people. Also, I just feel like I have a perspective and a lot of stuff to share, and that, whether or not that makes money as a business, but more just that I want to always be in conversation with people about these things that I'm thinking about. And so having just a platform, to share from, that's what Foliage Botanics really came about as. So it's like a space for me to share and a space for other people to join me in conversation about plants and ecology and herbal medicine.
You're a really wonderful artist and writer, and I really love how your drawings are kind of intertwined in your business and your writing, which you've been doing. We've been writing letters to each other ever since, well, kind of since we first met, but maybe like, yeah, a little bit after we first met and lived together and then like did our own thing for a bit. Um, we started writing letters, and then you started sending letters to like people kind of collectively, and like, so I think that's a really cool like element of your business is like your creative like work too, which is really unique. A lot of people don't do that. They like hire someone to do some drawings for them that they just use over and over and over, and I don't know. I think that's a cool part of your project. So
yeah, I love to draw and I love to write. So sometimes I wonder if people, I'm very verbose, like I'll send these like long-winded emails as my newsletters and stuff, but people can unsubscribe if they want to. Yeah, I mean, I love to write letters. Yeah, and the drawings, it's tedious. I draw all the labels and I like hand cut them. I mean, this is it's a small scale business here, so probably a lot of people can't do that because they're like producing a lot of things. But I feel like it's this element that makes me more of a part of the medicine that I'm sharing with people too, is that I spend time looking at it and drawing it and making a little label that not only am I making that medicine in real time at that moment, I'm making the label for it too. So it's sort of all part of this like seasonality of that medicine. And then the letters, I have a letter project, this mass letter project called The Bones We Collect. It's less herbal focused and medicine focused and more kind of from this personal experience place. I like describe it as this like a letter blog, but more, ideally it goes out quarterly, but there are a lot of people signed up, and I hand draw these handouts, and I stamp or paint the envelopes and hand address them and that kind of thing. So it does take a lot of time, but it's, I kind of talk about politics and personal experience. It's actually like a very vulnerable thing that I do. But it's fun and it's great, and I think people really appreciate it because you get something in your mailbox. It's like a real thing versus we're all just inundated with like a million emails and newsletters. And I think there's something that people really cherish about getting something in the mail and you feel really special and seen, even though it's a mass production. It's not that mass. Like there's only so much I can do, but it connects me to people more. And I think people really read every word with like a lot of care and like consciousness because they see how much effort I put into it as well.
Even though I've been all over the place. I mean, you've spent some years traveling too before you settled in where you are now, but I've like received your letters in all kinds of crazy places across the country because you're like, where can I send your letter? I'm like, okay, during this month I'll be here. You should send it to this place, you know?
Yeah, they're always like general delivery and like some town in the middle of nowhere, and I'm just like, okay. I have this vision of like a post office person, like the postman, like driving down the road and being like, "Are you Kelly?"
Yeah. I think one time I didn't get one because I had to leave that area. I think it was in Idaho or something.
Oh,
And
yeah, I think that that's
I
true.
missed it, yeah, but that was just one time. But I remember getting one when I lived in New Hampshire where you like drew me this picture of this owl. You like painted it or drew it in this and then like sent me the original, I think. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a beautiful little drawing painting. I don't know if you remember, but I thought it was just really cool. Yeah. I still have all your letters too. But.
Yeah, I sometimes, I mean, this is kind of like a morbid idea, but I thought about like if I were to die and people were to like, come to my funeral and celebrate my life, hopefully, that everyone would like bring letters that I had written to them and then like, I don't know, put them all out on a table and then be like, wow, look at all this. I mean, I'd like to be there ideally to see that, but maybe I'd be like hovering above and seeing all the letters like pieced back together like a big puzzle.
Mm-hmm. It's a lost art for sure, but people don't write letters anymore the way they used to,
Yeah, totally.
Well, I just read your blog posts, or that you said you started a blog recently, and I'm really excited that you have because you're a wonderful writer. And I read your piece on bioregional herbalism, and that's definitely a topic I've been thinking about for a long time and what that really means. And it's kind of gotten mixed up for me lately because I've been traveling a lot the past few years, and like for me, like really trying to grasp what bioregionalism means to me in the way that I live and like the fluidity of what is a region and all these things. But I really appreciated what you spoke about on your blog about bioregionalism, and maybe you could speak a little bit here as to how that influences your work and your perspective on the world.
Okay. Yeah. So that I feel like that perspective about bioregional medicine, I also like to refer to it as place-based. That definitely evolved for me over time. I've moved around a lot, as you said, and have more recently kind of grounded in this place where I am. And I definitely have, used lots of plants from other places and also sort of like used plants without a lot of care, to be totally honest, in my like early ages of discovering herbal medicine and trying to use plants. And I took a break from harvesting, wildcrafting, using like doing anything with plants for a while, to just like take some space and like really think about how I wanted to do it and what that looked like, and kind of like make up for the times that I didn't cherish everything that I had ever harvested and use it all to the best of my ability. So full disclosure, and then now I have definitely started using plants again and harvesting plants and trying to do it with a lot more intention. And so I feel like, yeah, this bioregional piece is partially based on this idea that um, there's so much abundance outside of our doors, and we don't really necessarily need to be buying plant matter from across the globe and from people that we don't really know who harvested it or how it was harvested or how it was grown. And I feel like there's too little questioning of that in the herb world. And it gets shipped across the world in these plastic bags, and it's not necessarily always like this amazing plant material. It's often just like it's lost a lot of vitality. So for me, I just wanted to start being an herbalist that doesn't order herbs from across the world, and started using plants in this more mindful way from the abundant land that's around me. And I have this privilege of living here on 500 acres where there's a lot of lush plant life, and I see myself as a steward of the land. So I'm not just going out there and clear cutting things and anything and everything that I find that could be made into a herbal remedy I'm taking. I spent a lot of time, spent those years not harvesting, just learning and seeing how things were growing and interacting and kind of going from there. So yeah, that's part of it.
Tuning into the place where you are seems important for a few reasons, and I think on your blog you mentioned too, like that part of what maybe seems important about bioregional herbalism or bioregionalism in the sense of like where you get your food, local like farms and all these ways of thinking like about this place, is that it really, in the world of climate change and like social upheaval and all these things, it just makes sense, like it's just the way that humans have been and should
Absolutely.
be, right?
Yeah, I think with herbal medicine there's definitely like kind of two ways that you could look at it, where it's, if you're using this as your medicine, you want to have access to the things that work for you. You don't want to just be like suffering from some serious ailment, but only have you maybe need some plant that would be best for it that grows somewhere else. Like that could be something at play. But at the same time, we live in a world and a culture where we're sort of taught like you can get whatever you want whenever you want it, whatever the season, from wherever in the world. And I think we're kind of past that point in society, in life, of getting to look at things like there's no limit. And so I often say this, that I'm like a person that loves metaphor, and I definitely use like the plant world for these greater metaphors. So I feel like you can learn a lot from plants and from herbal medicine, and that particular perspective about bioregionalism, and apply it. You can learn like a lot more from it. And I think it's when you commit to saying, I'm only going to be place-based and bioregional about my food or my medicine, you start to practice this idea that there's a cap on what you're allowed to have. So if you say like I'm only going to eat strawberries in season, then you cherish those strawberries in season, and then maybe you preserve them for the winter. And then in the winter, when your reserves run out and you have a craving for strawberries, you just say like, oh well, I have to wait until next spring when the strawberries come back. You don't just get into the car and burn a bunch of fossil fuels to go buy strawberries that were like pumped with chemicals somewhere in like Peru and shipped to you in like a plastic container, and then just get it whenever you want it, which is what we're most used to. And I think that that's a problem, and it's a growing problem. And I want to challenge that. I want to help people to see, to think about living seasonally like that, and applying it in this way, and then having that apply to those other pieces of our lives, thinking about how much we drive and how much we use. There's this farmer actually that I follow on Instagram who posted a video recently, and he's like always posting all these crazy videos about all sorts of things. He's a really hilarious person to follow. It's Mark Kimball, if anyone wants to follow him. But he posted this video that really struck me, where he was talking about fossil fuels and farming, and he was like pointing the camera at his car and at his tractors, and he was just like, look at this, like if we took all this gasoline and diesel and dumped it on the ground, we would just be like, oh my God, like I'm poisoning the planet, I'm polluting. But when we drive those things, we're dumping it, but we're just like dumping it into the air and it's invisible. So it just made me think about that a lot, and how it's just like a really important mindset to have.
I mean, here I am driving all over the place, but then again, I live in a space small enough that I can touch both walls. I'm like, well, it's give and take, like I'm burning diesel, but I'm using solar and pee outside, dig holes to poop.
Yeah, I mean, I commute to work at the Land Conservancy every day. It's like no one's perfect, and I mean, it's also like considering the fact that it's quite a privilege to be able to live on land and even have like the skills or have gone to school to study things, or to do any of those things. But I think it's more about just like growing the consciousness around it and appreciation, and that's like the ultimate goal is hopefully you get introduced to something like herbal medicine and you start to see it as this thing like, oh, I'm like using these things for myself, and then eventually it just turns into ecological appreciation and making the choice to not use and to just see it and appreciate it and know that it plays some greater ecological role that doesn't involve you at all.
Mm-hmm. When you teach your plant walks, you also teach like things that aren't just medicinal or edible, right? I mean, you teach like
for the most
everything.
Part, yeah. I mostly just teach botany and plant ID and talk about ecology and plant interactions, between each other, nothing to do with herbal medicine. Sometimes it comes up, especially if people have questions or they're like, oh, I've heard you could use that for something. But I definitely try with the plant walks specifically to have it just be about learning to identify plants, because I think that's also really important in using herbal medicine. We were talking about that earlier, that a lot of people don't have a background. They could be amazing herbalists and know all about health and about how to use these plants, but maybe don't know what that plant looks like in real life growing, or have never worked the land and that kind of thing. So I think it's really important. I like teaching that, especially, and seeing people sort of have the green wall disappear and to start seeing everything as different individuals and different species and that kind of thing. Ooh.
teachers and like how did they influence you?
Yes. Okay. So yeah. So I did not grow up at all knowing anything about plants at all. Uh, I never gardened or anything, and somehow I ended up going to this college in North Carolina, basically because a friend of mine in high school applied there, and I was like, I'll apply there too. And then I went to visit, and I just was blown away by people, the landscape, the community, and it's a work college, and there's a garden on campus where students grow food for the cafeteria, and then there's also this amazing perennial herb garden that students have tended for a really long time, and that had its own special crew called the Herb Crew. And I saw them, this crew of people, when I was a freshman. I saw them selling herbal teas in the cafeteria, and I just was like, "What? Like, you can do that? What is this?" And I just thought it was so cool, and I ended up getting onto this crew and learning how to garden. I never had gardened before. I learned how to grow vegetables, but I also specifically tended to this perennial herb garden with some annuals, and fell in love with it. Started reading about herbalism and reading about plants and going on plant walks. This was in North Carolina in the mountains near Asheville. So there were many different plant teachers and herbalists and botanists doing all sorts of things that I could, feed my interest. And then when I was still in school, I did this 1 weekend a month herbal program in North Georgia at an herb school called Botanologos with an herbalist named Patricia Kiritsi Howell, who is a Greek American herbalist, and she's really amazing. And it was a really cool program. It was like 11 months long, and she taught from this really great Western traditional Chinese medicine fusion perspective that I really liked. And most of the people in the class were, more adult than I was. I think I was 20 or 21 when I took that program. And most of the people who were taking it were like professional people, a lot of them professionals in the healthcare system, nurses, physical therapists. So it was really fascinating to learn about herbalism alongside being so young, alongside these medical practitioners. So that was a huge influence when I was young. And then during that time, during college too, I interned at United Plant Savers with you. And that was a very different perspective because we weren't gardening. We weren't really doing like herbal medicine. We were just learning about the forest and forest plants, traditional forest medicinals, but native woodland wildflowers. And that was definitely maybe the most magical experience of all my educational experiences. It was really transformative. We found like mushrooms. It just was like, it's like an unreal world hidden in the mountains of southern Ohio that no one's ever heard of.
I know, and
Well,
like
we did that.
it was like immersive, too, that we like were living together and like playing in the woods together, and then we had class and like would do work on the land too, but like we were always like, oh my god, let's go look for this thing. Oh my god, someone said there's some morels over here, and oh my god.
Totally. It was like fun, immersive living. Yeah, we were like sleeping under the moon and not washing our hair and like I don't know. It was great. So that, and I feel like that was actually maybe like the most foundational piece to throw in at that early point in my journey of herbal medicine to always have this perspective about like more from the perspective of plants and less from the perspective of like the herbalist or the healer, and to just be kind of thinking constantly about endangered plants and the whole ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So then after college I apprenticed with this herbalist named Seven Song in Ithaca, New York, who is a clinical herbalist, but he's also an amazing botanist. So that program was both very intensive. Well, it was intensive because I was apprenticing with him, so I was spending like all my time at his house. And he's a pretty interesting character. And So yeah, so I was intensively spending time with him, but then in his program we were learning about botany and materia medica. We went to the rainbow gathering to work the first aid station with him. That's a requirement of his program.
Where was it
Yeah,
the year that you apprenticed with him?
it was in the Uinta Wasatch Mountains in Utah
Wow.
at like 9,500 feet. It was,
Whoa.
yeah, it was amazing. And that was, yeah, an experience of its own. Superbly educational and eye-opening in lots of different ways. But yeah, the first aid stations, I worked that one, and I worked one a few years later in Vermont with Seven Song, and always an incredible experience if you're trying to learn how to help people, both because you're interacting with so many different types of people, so you get all these clinical skills of like just engaging with people and trying to help people out, and then lots of just like wilderness health issues to practice on.
Yeah, everyone getting some diarrhea thing or like dehydration or like giardia or something, you know.
Yeah, or like dog fights and people fights and all sorts of things. Yeah, burns, people like walking into their fires, and
Staff.
a lot of drug overdoses, and
Well,
yeah, or people coming off drugs and needing assistance as they go through all manner of different symptoms doing that. Yeah. So that's definitely a teacher, the Rainbow Gathering. Yeah. Okay. So then I apprenticed with Seven Song, did that. Then I kind of started to strike out on my own and started Foliage Botanics after that. And I started, I did part of a clinical program in North Carolina at the Blue Ridge School of Herbal Medicine, but I didn't finish it. And I was all that time helping out in Atlanta with this herbalist, Lorna Monty Brodek. She runs various free clinics in Atlanta, Georgia. This mobile clinic in her VW bus, and then there's this sort of more acute care clinic. It's like a shopping cart that you push around to different parks and that kind of thing, and then a free foot clinic for the homeless. So I did that for a while, and that really built a lot of my clinical skills doing that work and working with that particular population of people too. Yeah, and then I moved to New York.
yeah, and I forgot about your work with Lorna. Yeah, and doing all of that. I feel like I've not done hardly any clinical experience stuff. I think I've been kind of scared too, or something, or like jumping into the human part of it, because like each human is like its own universe, and the way that we can engage plants and humans is like a whole complex like puzzle, and then throwing bioregionalism into that, and like yeah, all of it it's a thing for sure. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think definitely what you just said about doing clinical work and maintaining this sort of bioregional attitude. I think finding that sweet spot between those things is a goal. I think that they kind of doing both can be very hard.
there's like a whole conversation that can come out of like what it means to practice clinical herbalism too, you know, like what people's goals are and aims are, like just improving quality of life. I actually remember, and I interviewed a while ago Mario, who studied with Seven Song as well, and we talked a little bit about like his perspective that he gained over the years of his own like experiences, but partly from Seven Song too, but just like focus on quality of life versus curing somebody of something, you know. And that really has been like, like quality of life could also just mean like someone going out and like and looking at the plants and like becoming more familiar with what's right around them, you know. I think clinical herbalism can look a lot of ways, and like
or even just having someone to talk to in an open and honest way and be heard. I think that a lot of people have pretty disempowering experiences in the healthcare system, being sort of brushed aside, or not really getting to be like a participant in their health choices. And so I think a lot of what herbalists can provide is just someone to talk to, and someone to be like an advocate for you with your health, even if you're not like providing every single thing for that person for them to use, or even providing anything. Like if it's just someone to help research something with you, I think clinical herbalism can be that as well.
I'm always thinking about, what does decolonization look like in our world today, and in the context of herbalism, that conversation's being had a lot. And I know that even like the model of a free clinic, like what Seven Song is doing, has an element of decolonization, but everyone has a different perspective on what that means, and then Indigenous folks have perspective on what that means to them too. But do you have any thoughts on how you have incorporated that into your business, your work, your walks, like that? Just thinking about that, and in the context of working with plants, or in the context of like running a business and like trying to exist in this world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and a big question. I think small ways that I feel like I think about this is, I mean, I think like what I said about clinical herbalism and people feeling like they have pretty disempowering situations in the healthcare system. And I think the role that herbalism can play for people in that way can be a form of decolonization, and that it sort of eradicates this like top-down structure of like, I mean, I don't want to talk too badly about doctors because they have a place, but I think that dynamic is a result of colonization in a lot of ways. So I think that, and then, I mean, I think with my particular project business, the amount that I really try for it to be less this sort of capitalist entity, and more this like empowering educational piece is, for me, I think personally, it acknowledges privilege that I have to live on land, to have studied the way that I have, to have traveled the way that I have, and to the privilege to have learned a lot of this information that's actually not the information of white people. Some of it is the tradition of European herbalism, but a lot of it isn't. And so I feel like there's want to kind of like break that down and give it back to as many people as possible. And I think, shifting away from this mentality of it being too closely related to like medical health too. I mean, I definitely have a background with like these clinical herbalists and learning about it as in a more medical way. But I think as I've made this shift to being more bioregional and place-based, and having these artistic elements and sort of more personal elements to it, there has been a lessening of this need for it to be like so official and so medical, so that it can be more accessible and tangible for people. And I think that medicalness is kind of like part of that like colonizer voice. So lessening that.
You use sliding scale too, right, for your plant walks?
Sliding scale for the plant walks, yeah.
I always think that's an easy way.
Or they're donation based, really. It's sliding scale donation based.
Like, sliding scale, but even if you can't, like
Exactly, yeah. And I've tried that definitely with the consultations too. I've done a lot of different models of sliding scale, or just like a low price, or like you can add on the medicine for extra and that kind of thing, just to try and make it as available as possible.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I'm curious, do you have any plants that you've been hanging out with a lot this year that you maybe like are excited to talk about? I'm just curious. Like we could get on like talking about specific plants, and that'd probably be another 3 hours. But yeah, of the place where you are, like like what are
yeah, the place where I am. Well, I'm a little more. Wouldn't really quite say boreal, but I like to say that. I'm a little more boreal than I've ever lived, and so a lot of like the northern trees I've really been resonating with. Evergreens, like balsam fir and hemlocks. There's a lot of hemlocks here. I mean, in the south, I don't know what it looks like in the south with the hemlocks right now, but I'm sure it's not good. So there's still a lot of fully healthy hemlock stands up here, even old growth hemlock stands. And black birch is a big one that I've been using a lot lately.
I missed that one. Oh.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's the yellow birch in the south that I remember seeing at higher elevations, but yeah, there's just so much black birch around here. And black birch is this amazing tree that's like, it's a first successional tree, so it's like one of the first trees to colonize a young forest. So there's often these like huge stands of young saplings, and on the property where I live, there's a part that was definitely clear cut at some point, or like an old farm field, and there's a lot of black birch in there.
What about black birch is awesome?
What about it is awesome? Well, ecologically it's awesome because black birches are dynamic accumulators, which means that their roots mine down deep and pull up minerals that are harder to tap by other plants and bring them up to the soil to make them more bioavailable for us if we ingested the bark of the black birch, but also other plants that maybe have a harder time growing just out of nothing. So they help make way for more mature forests. And, they take up space that maybe like a non-native, aggressive plant would maybe kind of jump in on. So ecologically, they're great for that. And then medicinally, but also just like taste-wise, they contain these methyl salicylates, which give it that wintergreen flavor, which is delicious. But it also is sort of anti-inflammatory and pain relieving. I like it a lot, like infused in oil as an external remedy. I've been making a couple different salves with it. And I made this great white pine black birch elixir this winter. Ooh. That was in my winter seasonal box that I sent out. It's awesome.
Cool. I remember one time I made some medicine. I haven't made medicine of black birch since, well, I guess in North Carolina it was yellow birch. I think there might be some black birch at high elevation in North Carolina, I think, but I lived in New Hampshire for a few years. But like I remember making a like headache formula. I don't remember the other herbs all the way that were in it in the formula, so it does depend on that. But I remember like I had a friend that would have these migraines and nothing would work, and she took this formula I had with black birch in it, and she was like, "I can't believe this! It just really helped." And I know again like the formula, but I don't know. I think there's something about it that like it's just magical.
Yeah, it's definitely like a mild remedy, but I've had a lot of good experiences with it. I actually remember I went to the Florida Earth Skills Gathering one February. I guess that's when it's in February, and at the everyone like sets out their blankets and does like little trading circles and stuff. So I bought this tincture formula from someone that was pedicularis and black birch, And I had never had either of those medicines. And I was like, what are these? What is this? And I just was like, this is amazing. I think at the time I used it for menstrual cramps and really loved it. But I think that's a great combination. That's another one of my favorite herbs, pedicularis.
Do you have pedicularis up there?
Not really. Sometimes you'll see it, but never in those big mass stands that you would see it in the South. But from when I was living in North Carolina, out at Dancing Springs, back in there, pedicularis. And this last April, when I drove out to Arizona, I stopped in the Ozarks. I'd never been there before. And I had just Googled campgrounds, and I found this amazing, totally off-grid campground. There was this amazing crystal clear creek that ran through it, and there were bloodroots blooming everywhere, and there was so much pedicularis and all these tiny wild native irises. Wow. Tiny wild native irises were blooming just everywhere. And I was the only person there, and I was just like, what is this place? It's so beautiful.
I want to spend more time in the Ozarks. I haven't. The Midwest, I haven't, besides our time in Southeast Ohio, which is kind of the Midwest, kind of Appalachia. I haven't been there too much. Yeah. Just driven through, and I'm just so antsy to see some prairie. But yeah.
I mean, I was really surprised by the Ozarks. I didn't know what to expect, but it was so beautiful. I mean, it was way further along in spring than it was I was there experiencing all of that. The red buds were blooming, and then I came back to New York, and we had one daffodil up. So it's pretty far ahead. But it was a fun spring teaser.
You've got cottonwoods up there, right?
Cottonwoods, yeah. Actually, I've been gathering. I just made my first batch of cottonwood bud salve yesterday.
I remember the last time we saw each other, we collected cottonwood buds together in California.
Yeah. Since then, I hadn't really done a whole lot of cottonwood bud harvesting, but since then I've been doing that a lot here each spring and late winter. And they're really different. The eastern, that's what we have is eastern cottonwood here, and they're much bigger, fatter buds, but really different, lighter. The oil is lighter. The oil I made from the ones we got, which were black and Fremont cottonwood buds, it was this deep, dark,
orange almost.
Yeah, orange, exactly. Yeah, amber, I want to say, amber color. And I remember the buds were thin and really sticky. Here the buds are so big and sticky, but more sticky inside when you start to tease them apart. And the oil is a nice golden color, a light golden. So different.
So you have a spring box in the works right now, and I ordered one for my sister, which I haven't told her yet, but maybe by the time this podcast goes out, it'll probably be your boxes probably will have gone out, or maybe not. I don't know. Do you have what are you making for your spring boxes right now? What are you conjuring and concocting?
Yeah, so it's still spring isn't for a while here in New York yet, even though other people are experiencing the first signs of spring. So they won't go out until May. Yeah, since I'm making this medicine for spring, but also from the products of spring, it doesn't go out right away in springtime. I'll tell you what I had in them last year. Okay. This will give you a sense of what could be in them. Because I have some ideas, but I don't want anyone to be like, what? She said it was going to be in there. Last year, I make maple syrup on the land, just a small amount. But last year I made chaga maple syrup. When I was boiling, I took these big hunks of chaga mushroom and boiled them in the sap, boiled it down to syrup. So it was chaga maple syrup. So there was a bottle of chaga maple syrup in the spring box. Oh my God. One thing I like to do for myself is make these seasonal vinegars. And for the spring box, I made a vernal vinegar that was infused with all sorts of things like dandelion leaves and violets. And I think there was horsetail and black birch. Some other things. That's more just a hodgepodge. Whatever's blooming, I throw it into a vinegar. Lilac blossoms. So there'll probably be another vernal vinegar in there of various things. There is an iron syrup, and the iron syrup that I make like an oxymel. That's maybe one of my favorite, because apple cider vinegar and honey are able to be, they're so local. I can get them so readily. I make a lot of remedies as like oxymels. And so that Blue Moon iron syrup, I have one in front of me. I'll read you what the ingredients were. Okay. Oh no, it doesn't have the ingredients on it. It was like yellow dock, nettles, dandelion, beets, blueberries. Can't remember what else was in there, but that was good. I had the cottonwood bud salve in the box, and a calamus tincture, calamus root. That was in there. So yeah, so it's the box. The boxes are a mix of herbal remedies, simple plants like blends and that kind of thing, simple tinctures, but then also like a wild food element too, because I think a lot of medicine we can, make more than just like a tincture, which is very like medicine-like. We can make gamasio with wild greens and get the nutrients and medicinal properties through our food, and or make like a soup stock mix or maple syrup, that kind of thing. Teas, that all sorts of different variations. And I'm hoping to kind of do a little bit more of that this year. More wild food things.
Like foodie medicines.
Yeah. Yeah, to like preserve, but also like educate about like, oh, you can use Japanese knotweed for food. That's a way to kind of steward this aggressive, I don't want to say invasive, but yeah, non-native plant that's problematic. And, do like, I don't know, maybe I could send like Japanese knotweed pickles or something, and then people are, oh, this tastes so great, I can do this. And then we start like using these things that are so overabundant. Yeah. Great. Oh yeah, and in the boxes too, it's not just these bottles of remedies, it's also writing, there's handouts, there's information. Last year there were these hand-drawn medicine cards that by the end of the share you had a whole pack of these cards. So there's these educational and artistic elements to it that I think make it different than other people's seasonal shares, but they're very reflective of who I am and the ethos of my business.
It reminds me somewhat of like my land capsule project that I've been doing too in some ways, but like totally different in other ways too. Like it's so you and the place where you are, and that your creativity and stuff. And I love that. Like I had someone from Alaska message me too, and like, and they're like more of a botanical artist, and they were like, can I do a land capsule like version from Alaska? Like, would you care if I called them that? I was like, no, I don't care. Like, and it was totally cool to receive some stuff that she did that like was so Alaska, and like artwork from like the lands of Alaska, and I don't know, it was really cool. I think it's
that's really cool.
I love like
I would like it to be that too. It's there are different plant people and herbalists in so many different bioregions. We're not all in the same bioregion. And if we were like sending each other medicine and information back and forth, it could just be this great ecological conversation that we're all having. So it could be for, a novice too, who doesn't know much about plants or herbal medicine and wants to start trying things and tasting things and building their home apothecary. But I'd also love it to be with other people who know a lot, who want to just kind of exchange ideas and exchange medicines in that way too. Because I love to do that.
Cool. I know, it's so fun. I'm like, oh, I want to get a share from you. I'm like, I don't have an address. But
thank you. Kelly, where are you? Where should I send this to? Yeah, I mean, that is probably the biggest problem with, sending things in the mail, like my letter project. Like I'm always getting some of them sent back because, younger generations, everyone's like so mobile still.
Totally.
People's addresses change a lot.
Well, is there anything you want to leave us with in this conversation as we wrap it up? Any last thoughts, feelings, insights, epiphanies?
Well, one of the other questions that you had sent me to prepare with which, was like 10 minutes before you called me. But I thought really interesting was, I think you asked me this because maybe I said something about it in the blog.
Yeah, I think I skipped that question.
Spirituality.
Yeah.
And whether spirituality needed to be a part of having this, place-based focus or having a relationship with plants. And I think it's like a thing I definitely have thought about it a lot, and I don't totally know what my opinion is. I think in my blog post, I think I wrote, like, some people will say you have to have this spiritual element to engaging with the land, and I don't really feel like that's totally true. And I feel like it's not totally true in that I don't think it needs to look a particular way. I mean, I think it also ties back to the decolonization thing, of that a lot of plant medicine and people's relationships with plants came from a spiritual place, originally, for everyone. And then part of colonization everywhere, in Europe, in the Americas, was eradicating this spiritual element, or coming in and saying, like, your spirituality has to look like this. So I tend to lean away from people dictating what spirituality has to look like, but I think it's also leaning away from saying there can't be any spirituality to this, like what I was saying, it has to be medical, or it has to be like this clinical perspective. I think that is not good either. So for me, I think my practice and my relationship with plants is very spiritual, but it's different than other people's. And I have a lot of spiritual experiences out in the woods, and I go there for a lot of respite and space and, I don't know, transcendent experiences of my own kind. But yeah, I think that's part of that question that you said about decolonization and herbalism. I think that's something to think about. And then I think it's important, as you sort of, for anyone who's kind of navigating the herb world and finding a teacher that they resonate with, or a perspective that they resonate with, it is just sort of about finding, like, who you connect with and what practices and what ideals match with yours, and letting that evolve over time too. Like, maybe you come into it through this one arena, and then it really changes for you. And I feel that way, that it has for me, that I've had teachers that came from a specific perspective that I was like, yeah, I'm all about that, and I appreciate that, and I learned from them, but now it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know sometimes our teachers have one way, and we don't necessarily have to agree with them 100% either, We all have our own connections and feelings about things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just always be wary of anyone who told you that you have to do something any particular way. I'm the kind of person that's not cool with, like, authoritative things like that. So herbal medicine shouldn't be any different.
Mm-hmm. So how can people find you? You're online in various ways, and yeah, how can people find you?
Well, I have a website. It's foliagebotanics.com. A lot of people think it's Foliage Botanica, but I think that's a different thing. It's Foliage Botanics. And then I have an Instagram at Foliage Botanics. And I have a newsletter, an email newsletter, and then I have that letter project, The Bones We Collect. That project is free and for the people, I like to say. So if people want to sign up for that specific thing, they just email me their mailing address, their actual mailing address. So those are the ways you can find me. Cool. Online and in real life.
Mm-hmm. And people can sign up for your boxes through your website, right?
Yes, you can sign up through the website, exactly.
And you do, like, you have spring, summer, fall, and winter shares?
Yeah, it's 4 boxes. Yeah, so you can sign up for the whole share, and it's a little bit discounted if you get the whole share, and then, or you can just go box by box. So there'll be like a little spot in the shop on my website that'll be like spring box, summer box, so you can just do that.
Cool. Sweet. Well, I'm really glad we sat down and got to chat with each other via, even though it's through the computer screen, but it's still really sweet, and I'm really glad.
Yeah, I love your podcast, so I'm honored to be on it amongst so many other incredible plant people, really.
I think I asked you like a year and a half ago or something, like to do it, and I've been like, soon, soon. And here we are, finally.
Yeah, I had great visions of coming, like when I came to visit you a few years ago. We like drove up into the Sierra Nevadas and went to a hot springs, and I was like, we're gonna do that again, and that's when we'll do it. But that hasn't happened, so I'm glad to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah, for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey y'all, you just listened to a conversation with Hannah Schiller of Foliage Botanics on the Ground Shots podcast, and the interstitial music for this episode is by Damiana, and the song was called Lady Death Anthem. And thanks to Kate, who's been helping me with some music searching. She's sending me suggestions for musicians that she feels like would resonate with the podcast, and I've been using some of them, so thank you so much, Kate. And in this episode's show notes, you can find links to Damiana's website as well as anything that we mention of Hannah's in the podcast. So her Instagram and her website, all of that can be found there. And I highly encourage you to buy some of her medicine and one of her seasonal apothecary shares. Her medicine is super amazing and tasty, so I encourage you to do that. I think with that, let's go ahead and end this podcast episode, and I really thank y'all so much for listening, and until next time. This episode of the Ground Shots podcast was produced by Opia Creative. Our music is by Mother Marrow. If you'd like to help us continue to make this audio project a reality, consider becoming a monthly supporter on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt. where we have rewards like entry into patron-only giveaways, additional audio interviews, extra educational content, and much more. You can also share our work and give us a review on iTunes. Visit our website at ofsedgeandsalt.com to see what else we're up to and a log of our episodes when they come out. Check out our show notes for information about how to find us and our guests. Until next time, y'all, thanks for listening.